Welcome to Generative AI Threat or Friend to Marketplaces webinar. I'm Pavel Marceau, Managing Editor for the AIM Group, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's session. Now, unsurprisingly, we've had record registrations for this event, so we are going to give a few minutes to the people who haven't caught up with us yet. We'll just give them a little bit of time to join us. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, FreeSpe, and all of us at the AIM Group and FreeSpe are super happy to see all of you here today. FreeSpe is a platform that orchestrates customer conversations, and I'd like to share a brief video about them. Incoming shortly, if you can wait. There we go. That's FreeSpe. Now, generative AI has really been dominating conversations since the explosion of ChatGPT late last year. The tech has really been advancing at an incredible pace, and the A Group has, of course, been watching, researching, and analyzing with incredible interest. We have lots of thoughts, and today our resident expert, Jonathan Turpin, will share some of the insights with you.
Hello, everybody. Just going to share my deck. Is that okay and up, Marcel?
Absolutely. Now, the format today will be a presentation from Jonathan, followed by a brief presentation from Tanguy Talon, FreeSpe's VP of Global Sales. We'll wrap things up with a 10-15 minute Q&A, and you should be able to access the Q&A function at the bottom of our screen. Type your questions into this Q&A
Okay, we seem to have lost our moderator, so I'm going to get on and start the webinar. So welcome everybody, and I've only got 20 minutes today, so we're going to jump quickly in, and I'm going to make the assumption that you all know what generative AI is and have seen a fair amount of it so far, and we're going to go straight into trying to understand a little bit about the implications for marketplaces. But I first want to kind of set the scene a tiny bit, because I think there are three important developments coming up that will be particularly relevant to marketplaces and that will help shape what we do with generative AI, or what marketplaces do with generative AI. So first of all, the introduction of domain-specific LLMs, so large language models. So this is the customization of models to very specific areas, and that could be, you know, autos marketplaces or real estate marketplaces, etc. And what it will do is make them much more precise in terms of the particular areas we work in, and it will also help reduce the kind of level of errors and issues that arise out of them. And I think in general, you know, the strongest parts of generative AI in the near future are going to be domain specific. I think it's going to take a lot longer to get general AI to work very well, and that actually it's the niche applications that are going to be strongest in the near term. Second thing I'd like to pick up is the creation of generative AI chatbots, and we haven't really seen these yet, but they're beginning to come through, and they will bring the much more sophisticated kind of conversation levels that go with generative AI into the chatbot space. And I think that's particularly relevant for marketplaces. And I think when you think about all the interactions between your clients, the dealers, agents, etc., and their customers, the general public looking for a car or a home or a job, you can begin to see how that becomes a very interesting kind of opportunity. And I think we will finally get to chatbots that are actually capable of chatting in a decent way, rather than the ones you fear to meet when you arrive on your banking site. And then the third thing, and I don't know whether all of you will have seen this. I know it's been strong in the news in the States. I haven't seen much on it in the UK, but we think that audio is going to become, you know, in a little bit longer time frame, very important. We've got the big announcement from Amazon of its new generation of Alexa based on generative AI. If you haven't seen the demos of it, go have a look. It's really interesting. It's the first, I think, really big step change, and potentially it's a game changer in the way audio interaction works between people and AI. So, and I think, you know, that's not going to be an immediate impact on marketplaces, but I think this is one really to watch, and particularly in areas like jobs. So those are important background factors, we feel, in what's going to happen with marketplaces. So let's kind of address the first big kind of question, which is, you know, are marketplaces going to end up being circumvented by AI concierges and agents that go out and do your bidding? And on this slide, you can see a little while ago I did this, a query into, I'll blow up the words of it, a query into Bard, Google's AI, generative AI program, to ask it to find me 10 houses, and actually it did a lot better than I thought against my criteria. Certainly lots of problems in the listings, but you can see the beginnings of what generative AI might be able to do. So you've got that question of whether this could kind of overtake marketplaces, and just your normal kind of concierge service that you'll use going forward will actually begin to be the thing you use for accessing cars, homes, jobs, etc. By the way, if Bard can really get me a 1.2 million house in Chiswick overlooking the river, I shall be using it ahead of Rightmove any day. But we think actually there is still a rather crucial role for intermediaries to play. And we think there are three big reasons that are important for intermediaries to be involved. The first is that to really make these services work well in a generative AI environment, you need very substantial data. And we think it's not just, you know, having access to unique data, it's also being able to curate data effectively, join it up, clean it up, etc. And in a world where you've got, you know, more fake information, more difficult to determine information out there, actually having a real source of truth that you can trust, and a well regulated set of data is going to be increasingly important. So size of data and trust, I think, are two things that really play very much into the hands of marketplaces and as intermediaries. And then I think there's a third that will apply in some cases, which is particularly as we begin to move to transaction. I think many of the services that are out there will end up pointing where the transaction is. And as marketplaces move, in some cases, into the transaction, that will be a strong differentiator from other players in the market. So we're big believers that marketplaces have a very kind of robust approach and defense against other people using generative AI, other companies to kind of come around the sides. And I think there are three other things you've just got to remember about marketplaces that are not specific to generative AI, but, you know, you've got a period of developing new services, evolving services into this kind of AI era. And you will have, for that period, the real strength of the brands and the direct traffic of the major marketplaces supporting as ever. You have relationships with dealers, which are incredibly important in building out the right sort of data, and very hard for other people to build in the same way and same structure as marketplaces. And then you have very much the specialist user experience. And although we believe the user experience is going to evolve, the fact that it is a focused vertical service, I think, as happens today, will make these services stand out amongst the potential disruptors and challenges that come using AI approaches. So we're kind of pretty bullish for where leading marketplaces in particular end up in this space. But that's not to say that gateways are not going to be critical partners. So I just wanted you to kind of think about and imagine this conversation. I come home in the evening, I'm a bit jaded with the AIM group, and I ask Alexa, you know, have any interesting new jobs come up? And I might get an answer something like this in the future. You know, yes, I've got 5 for you. Do you want me to summarize them, or shall I send them to your mobile? So I think we're going to see still, in the way that Google or Bing today kind of intermediate between the consumer and marketplaces, I think we're going to see the same thing. It's going to be more complex in its nature. This isn't simply an SEO or an SEM kind of link. And the relationships and complexities in relationships with gateways will be substantial. And I'm sure there will be some interesting regulatory questions around access, etc., as we move forward, particularly, you know, where some of the big global players are involved. So I think gateways are still very important, but there are some very good reasons for believing that they're not the be-all and end-all of control over the classified space. Moving on to another kind of big challenge, hallucination, as it's called, the ability of generative AI to invent stuff, clearly is a material issue for all kind of generative AI applications. And I think we think kind of a couple of things here. We're looking at the amount of different technological developments that are going on to counter the problems, all kinds of strategies for removing hallucination. We also kind of are looking at the fact that, you know, we're going to get much richer, deeper, specific niche data in dedicated niche LLMs. And we believe that actually this is a problem that, though it will persist for some time, is going to get beaten technologically to a level that's acceptable for most purposes. I think for marketplaces, the key thing to think about in the near term is going to be how it relates to regulatory requirements and which kind of activities are comfortable with a little bit of error. And I think actually a lot of search, which is, you know, probably the biggest and the most interesting, you know, initial kind of direction for how generative AI will be used. I think a lot of search can afford to be, you know, not 95%, you know, not 95% perfect, not 100% perfect, a little bit out. But it's clearly an issue that's going to have to be watched fairly closely. So, you know, and I think medium term, this feels like an issue that will just evolve away and erode. By the way, this image was created by Midjourney, the generative AI image generator. I asked it to create an image of a computer experiencing a hallucination, and find it a bit scary that its idea of a computer's nightmare is a human face yelling at you in a multicolored background. But anyway, moving on back to marketplaces. So where do we think generative AI is going to have most effect? I mean, clearly search is right up there at the top, given both its significance to marketplaces, but also, you know, what we already see of generative AI. And I kind of just want you to imagine a kind of complex query that might be possible. And you're going to say to me, well, no, nobody's ever going to ask a query like that. And that's absolutely right. Nobody's going to ask this query. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because I think it tells you a lot about the structure of how you build services with generative AI. But just humor me for the moment and accept this as a kind of search that might go on. And I kind of want to pick out several things in it. So I'm going to pick these out in different colors one by one. So first of all, if I look at this search, we've got a lot of general third-party web data. So the ability to access information that's fairly universally available. It's not going to be exclusive to your marketplace, but can really be helpful in refining a search. I think we've then got another level of data in here, which is kind of a little bit more interesting. It goes back to those relationships with agents, etc. We've got, you know, in this particular case, a real estate search, and we've got unstructured estate agent data effectively in here that we may be able to use, that we probably haven't been able to use very effectively in search in the past. So, you know, a sustainable energy system may well be in the particulars of the property, won't be in a standard real estate search. And there might be information that actually can be derived, you know, longer term out of images, you know, things like a shady garden and so on, where actually the technology begins in time to be able to identify things that are important to people. And, you know, you don't know what those things are until you've played and allowed people to search for what they want. And then I think we get another even kind of higher value set of information, which is rich specialist data. And there's one item in here down at the bottom, as you can see, price flow for the area. A lot of marketplaces will have valuation models that are reasonably often unique to them, often offer something that isn't publicly available elsewhere. So you've got a real ability to bring your own unique data in different ways to the proposition. And then finally, we've got in blue here now, the site behavioral data that's really quite interesting. So I might want to know in the real estate world, you know, which homes are attracting a lot of views. And I might want to actually go back and, you know, in terms of personalization, refer to the stuff that I've looked at before. So I might want to say, you know, I want to skip the homes I've seen before, etc. And the point here, I think, is that there is an awful lot that is that marketplaces can build that's interesting, valuable to consumers, and where they have a good degree of control over the data, whether it's through their relationships with others, unique data acquired, etc. And I think one of the key things in thinking about this future is really to begin to figure out, you know, what's the data people really want, and what are the kind of things they'll really ask, and how can you begin to structure, you know, search in particular in a way that is much more sophisticated than what exists today. If I pop all of that color on at the same time, you can see there are only 4 little bits of black, and those are the only 4 things that exist in a traditional search in this particular query. So I think this is, you know, one of the really kind of interesting areas. When we look, as I said, at those kind of searches, nobody's going to ask a long search. I think we're all kind of pretty bad generally at searching the web, Googling, etc. It's hard, it can often be frustrating. And I think one of the big lessons out of prompt engineering, the kind of science of how to get the best out of LLMs, is the steer that you begin to have to get them to ask questions and develop a conversation. So I wouldn't see a query ever being anything like as big and complex as that. I would see our future queries very much being a conversation with the AI, and the AI enticing out of consumers what are the things that are really important, and understanding how those work to narrow down searches, etc. And I think, you know, this is all a world that's about dialogue, not about simply kind of putting in a query and getting back a set of results. When we look at how the different verticals are going to be affected, we believe they'll be affected, and there's potential to disrupt in different ways across the spectrum. We think those that are going to be least affected are the things that are more commodity, and we could put cars on that end of the spectrum. I mean, cars are unique, but they are, you know, reasonably similar. They come in the same types. They're reasonably kind of close commodities. So, you know, we think in some ways they're going to be at the less affected end. If I try and construct those kind of complex queries for cars, I run out of interesting things I can ask much earlier than I do with, say, general goods, or with fashion, or homes, as you've already seen. And then, you know, at the kind of top end of this list, I have recruitment, which is the most highly personalized of searches. It's the one that's most complex, and it's the one, I think, where generative AI is going to add massively the most value. So I think, you know, our view is that the commodity end is going to be less challenged, less a threat. There are still going to be important things to be done with generative AI, but the kind of the need for it is smaller, or rather maybe the value in it to the consumer in searching in particular is smaller. At the jobs end, it really becomes, you know, very substantial. Another way of looking at this is things that are products tend to be at the easier end, things that are services tend to be at the more complex end. So jobs in particular, I kind of want to come to. It's, I think of all the classified markets, the recruitment market is by far the most challenged, or going to be the most challenged, and most at risk of disruption or self-disruption of all of the classified markets. And I still think, when I say self-disruption, that the people most likely to be successful in disrupting it are the existing players who are in the right position with the right data, etc. But I think it's going to be most important in the recruitment space to really get your mind around this very, very quickly. And that's because, this is not just marketplaces, but recruitment itself is super complex. It's a very dysfunctional market. And individual jobs and individual job seekers are very complex, not easily defined in a structural way, and in many ways they are therefore the perfect territory. For those who've been to our recruitment conferences, I think I've been banging on for about 4 or 5 years now about AI bringing in what I've nicknamed Headhunter 3.0, and here, characterized as Alexa, but I can imagine a world where as part of a process of looking for a job, the AI chats with me, and this is why audio, I think, is pretty important here. It does what a headhunter would do, of getting to know me, my interests, what I want, my behavioral kind of characteristics, etc. At the same time, the AI is communicating with clients, not just the recruiter, but maybe other people within the business, to understand the role, the culture, etc. And you get a much, much richer set of data that you can match. And always, traditionally, headhunters have been the best way to put things together. So I think the recruitment is potentially the most challenged, but also the most exciting kind of opportunity that generative AI brings. So changing the kind of direction of the topic slightly, here's one of my favorite AI applications, which is the Tipsy robot bar in Las Vegas. And it isn't just robots, there is AI in action behind the scenes. And the kind of question at the top is, how robotic is the robotic bar? And the answer to this is that there are 2 robots, but it takes 8 humans to actually make the robotic bar work. They support the robots on the things the robots aren't so great at, and presumably they go and collect all the glasses that are out of reach, and so on and so forth. But the kind of point I make is that there's a real kind of confluence, I think, that we're seeing of not AI replacing people, but AI complementing people. And we've got the beginnings of what has been nicknamed by many of the providers, Microsoft included, the kind of co-pilot applications that help people do their roles. And I think one of the biggest near-term transformations in marketplaces will be an application of those kind of co-pilot activities. And I'm not going to go through these kind of in detail. They'll be in the slides that you can download afterwards. But I think this is very much about saying both, for the clients of marketplaces, the agents, etc., there is an awful lot of stuff that they can be supported on very effectively by AI, and that marketplaces can potentially help with, including all the preparation of materials, for listing, etc., but going beyond that into other stages of the workflow of those intermediaries. And likewise, users, particularly on the job side again, but elsewhere as well, there are a whole range of applications that generative AI can support. And I think in some ways these are the easiest things for marketplaces to begin to get their mind round, to test, etc. Search is clearly a much bigger beast. It's going to take longer to do. And I think we'll quite soon, well, I say quite soon, we're already seeing quite a lot of these kind of initiatives happening where, generative AI is being used, to produce listings, to produce application letters, etc. And with very, very good, very high success rates in supporting the people that are out there that use them. And I think the other thing you've got to also remember in the back of your mind about generative AI is just what it can do to transform the internal efficiency of these businesses. And it's interesting, process, not just for its marketplace, but more broadly, recently announced a suite of capabilities that it was introducing internally to make its team more generally more efficient. And I think, there will be broad initiatives like that, but I think at marketplaces, there is already a lot of AI in place kind of in the back office as such, but I think generative AI is going to create a lot more opportunity to drive stronger efficiencies out of the business. So last thought on winners and losers, and we think that probably generative AI is going to further strengthen number ones against number twos in the marketplace business. And that's because it'll need serious investment, and that's always easier at the top level in the market. It builds on unique scaled data, and usually the leader in the market is most of the time the player with the most sophisticated, most joined up data and most extensive data. Clearly the brand strength and traffic arguments that I've made before. I think number ones will also be able to better leverage the relationships with gateways, and that will allow them probably to move kind of a bit faster and in a bit more interesting way with the gateways. And then, our belief is that generative AI will help lock in clients and users a lot more. So if you think about this, if you're a client and you begin to get more support on your workflow, more sophisticated ways of helping you in your business, that's a kind of stronger lock-in. And for users, if you've begun to get the kind of personalization dimension that can be a bit more sophisticated with generative AI in terms of remembering your preferences, your past queries and so on, you begin to have a lot more reason to come back to the same place. Not that users don't in general mostly come back to the same place with marketplaces. So I think on balance, we're going to see generative AI, strengthening the leaders and relative to the number twos. Tiny bit of what's happening in reality. There are still relatively few applications out there, or at least certainly applications out there and very public. I think there's quite a lot going on behind the scenes. But here's just a few kind of examples for you to think about. Again, these will be in the deck, but you can see at the top we've already got application writing and job listing creation, and interestingly, the feedback at Career was that only a fraction of SMBs actually alter the suggested job ads that are created. So it's kind of quite an interesting kind of statement about the effectiveness. Honk in Norway, go have a look at the AI-powered search. It's the only one I found actually on a website so far. Probably people tell me quickly that I've missed some interesting ones. Don't be daunted by the fact it's in Norwegian. You can put your questions in English, and that's another of the potential interesting factors in generative AI, maybe less relevant to marketplaces, but the ability to work in multiple languages very easily. And Vendora is interesting because you've got an application here in terms of fraud detection. And then, there are lots of ChatGPT search plugins. I don't think they're the exciting bit of where search should be, as you have to be in ChatGPT to kind of use them. But it's not just Zillow, but Stepstone, CarGurus, others have got plugins that you can go play with and see. So finally, as I'm overrunning as usual, some kind of key takeaways. I suspect most of you are already kind of past this anyway, but start now. You have to pilot, you have to build skills. This is going to be complex stuff, and getting the right people involved is going to be very difficult, very challenging, given the demand, universally across industries for this skill set. So I think it's really important to get started soon. Clearly, search is the core, and I can imagine we're going to see a lot of beta type searches on the side that allow people to experiment with a different way of dealing with search. Talked about chatbots and the potential there. I mean, to me, I really think, and actually it's interesting with the tie into FreeSP, and hopefully Tanya will talk about these subjects kind of later, but you've got the whole area of customer service. Quite often on a marketplace at the moment, you go to kind of get information on a car or a home, and it's a kind of simple form that you fill in, etc. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. It's a simple form you fill in. It seems to me the time to actually get real-time feedback, real-time interaction potentially could be just around the corner. And that's a broader question for, car dealers and estate agents and recruiters as well, how they kind of can begin to engage in a more interesting way with their customers. I think you've got to be mindful of gateways emerging. I think you need a process, at the strategic level at the moment to track this and think about it and understand, how you might link in to other parties. And I think, fundamentally, as I said, data is the strategic asset. You've really got to understand, how more interesting data can be used and engaged to make your services more compelling and actually really work much better for the consumer, as is truly possible. And I think there's a real question to say, can you either acquire or curate unique data sets in a way that really gives you strategic advantage in the market? And then finally, and not finally in the sense, I think it'll be one of the earliest things, AI-based tools for the agents, dealers, recruiters are just, to me, an absolutely obvious way forward in the near term. So that's all from me. And I'm going to hand over now. We're going to answer some questions in about 2-3 minutes. But I'm going to hand over first to Tanguy to say a little bit about what Frisbee is doing in this area.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. And yes, so I'll be very brief. I get a few minutes as usually. There's still a lot to do, so give me 2 seconds to bring a few slides on the screen. But basically, so I hope everything is displaying well. I like to surface or approach it from kind of a slightly complementary approach for what you mentioned, Jonathan. I guess we all agree, yes, there's potential in generative AI. I guess all of you are actually exploring it, testing stuff with it, and etc. We do the same at Frisbee. And yes, there's something to do connected to the search, to the ID, to the initial match, for sure. We also truly think that there's something to be done to ensure the ideal flow between the buyer and the seller down the route with personalized engagement. Is what you mentioned with like lock in the seller and the user with the tool you can power. I truly think that there is something strong in there. And the beauty of this is a bit more vertical agnostic. So I would challenge a bit the stuff when saying that, for instance, car might be a bit less impacted by AI. Well, I think that in this engagement, they are as much concern and can have as much impact as any other verticals. And if we zoom slightly more in there, try to put a few thinking on the paper that can be interesting to share. You as marketplaces, you are collecting millions of live interaction, right? So the first thing generative AI can help you with is to get through the noise somehow and detect the actual pattern, trends, intent, even at a user level, and then help automate personalized engagement at scale. So make sure that, okay, based on a specific thing, you can trigger something. But we get the feeling that, and even the conviction, that the true power of AI is when not only you do that on an event basis, basically, okay, I understand that an email had been sent and this is the intention, boom, I can answer. If you go beyond that, and if you can reconnect that to the user journey itself, so it's not just this email, it's like, okay, this action happening after a call, a search, an email, a download, then I understand the true intention of the user and I can properly build my engagement at scale. And thanks to AI, I can do that at a very user level because I got the power to do this. So we convene that here, there's a key component in properly using AI. And our conviction is to do it. AI is a great tool, right? But you need the right infrastructure to make sure AI can drive you all of this power. So you need to be collecting the data in the right place and all of the data. You need to be able to organize this data. So this user journey is kind of reconnecting all the data point to a user so you can feed AI. You need to be able to have what we consider audience builder, so then you can properly target the right person, and the engagement engine. So AI can actually craft the right message, but we have the machinery to send the message at the right time with the right channel to the right person. So These are, in our view, key components that you need to have in the background so AI can truly supercharge your platform. And this is just one example out of tons of examples we could have. But let's say that thanks to all of this, you can detect that, wow, this person, and I took an automotive example in this case. Let's say that, okay, you detect that it's a first-time EV buyer. You detect that it's financially approved. You also detect out of the last conversation that a test drive have been booked. Well, you can send very personalized message reminding about the test drive, but also pushing for financing help because it's a first-time buyer, and also pushing for help in finding the right charging setup because, again, he's a first-time buyer. It's also stuff you could share with the dealer, so we can see that as a nice upsell opportunity. So there's many more, but just to illustrate how deep you could go in being the helping hand in this process. And the closer you go into transaction, the more important this kind of personalized engagement is going to be. So this is it. Again, a very short time to present, but basically this is what we do at FreeSpear, right? We're here to help you build this personalized engagement at scale to deliver better experience. For those who've been knowing us for years, there's kind of a shift in the last month connected to that, but we truly believe that this is the core and the essence of what we can bring to your marketplaces and to the market. So this is it. Now I'm leaving the stage to Pavel to monitor the question and answer them.
Thank you, Tanguy. We have many questions from the audience. And just a quick reminder, this event is recorded and the recording will be available to everyone who registered within a few days after the webinar. Now, some of the interesting questions that we got from the audience. Here's one. I guess it's both for Jonathan and for Tanguy. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes you can make as a marketplace dealing with generative AI at such an early stage?
Well, I think the biggest mistake of all is not engaging and thinking that this doesn't affect you. I think, there's always a worry that you've got a hype cycle and that, this is just kind of overplayed at the moment and so on. But I think, when you look at the scale of investment across the industry by the major global players, when you look at the kind of almost waves of technology that seem to be coming down the line, I think to kind of put your head in the sand would be the real problem. And I think you've got to be willing to go out there and try stuff and get some of it wrong and get some of it right and experiment. So, I don't think you can kind of believe that you're going to produce perfect, products straight away that use the technology. I think everybody is in a learning stage around it. So I think you need fluidity. I think you need, R&D. You need to be willing to invest, and you need to be willing to waste some of that investment by making mistakes.
Yeah, fully agree. Maybe if I had to add something, is also trusting too much in AI only. I mean, it's a tool that will connect to all of the things you already have and that will improve them. So it's also making sure that you have the right infrastructure to properly welcome AI to your platform and use it in a good way.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I think, potentially this connects up the parties in a much more interesting way. And it comes back to that point about conversation and how you begin to have a conversation, say, around buying a house or a job or whatever. And suddenly you've got the ability to go from being fundamentally an advertising medium that connects A and B to actually, facilitating that conversation in a reasonably sophisticated way. So yeah, I would agree with that entirely.
And I think that one of the key stuff also from maybe also the question I've seen is, I don't really see the AI as being a lot of automated chatbot. And so as a buyer are gonna only interact with a machine that will answer all the question, I surely think that AI will help the discussion between two humans. So they're like the dealer or the house agent. You can tell them exactly the situation, the expectation, the intention. You can tell them this person is looking from a house from this price to this price, and I've been happening this in whatever. And from the buyer, you can also feed the buyer with a lot of things to help this conversation. So I think it's going to ease a lot the process and make the two of them feeling like, wow, okay, we have a more interesting conversation.
Yeah, it comes back to that co-pilot point. You know, this is enabling people to do stuff better, quicker, faster, more responsively. And, you know, it's about finding the right information, but leaving the human touches that are so important. And often the right information can only come through the person. So, you know, and that's why it's such an interesting opportunity. And it's an opportunity to get much more into the workflow of your clients.
And we have quite a few questions interested in whether you can actually shield your marketplace from AI being able to extract your proprietary data. Are there some defensive strategies that marketplace can implement?
You know, I'm not an expert in the kind of technical areas of this, but I think we will see some. I mean, we already have in the world of you know, Google and scraping, we already have protections at a kind of technical and messaged level. And I think we will see enough kind of challenges on the legal front and enough kind of interest in creating the right kind of frameworks to make this work. So, you know, yeah, I think there are going to be, I mean, you can already see there are challenges out there, you know, of authors challenging for, you know, their data being used for training, etc. Yes, there is a risk if you put your data in the wrong place that you could end up having that data, you know, misused. But I think we will find resolutions for those. And I think as well, you know, if you come to the kind of the niche dedicated AIs, you know, a lot of the capability of training those AIs with the best range of data in the best structured way will sit with the marketplaces and owners of that data. And that will, I think, allow them to get an edge over people who are simply, you know, scraping elements of data, etc., to try and create challenger kind of propositions.
And I think there's another perspective also. So there's the AI scrapping your data. They're also going to be the bot interacting with your listing. And then think, for instance, about a private seller selling a house, and you got like fake real estate agent bot getting there to trying to find the best price and just getting too much noise, so this person cannot actually talk to real person. So there will be attempts like that, and there will be some of them. So I think there's the thing of making sure you keep your privacy data somewhere. This might be tricky at some point, but there's also a key element in trust and safety when you should also protect your users from detecting this kind of engagement from too much of a bot traffic profile and etc. So I'm thinking about the conversation, and there's a lot of mechanism you can do to actually detect this kind of behavior and make sure that you allow true communication between like real people, but not this kind of bot traffic that shall increase, unfortunately, I guess.
And a question for Tanguy, really. Tanguy, what do you think are some of the best tools that you can use to optimize the use of generative AI as a marketplace?
Wow, that's a very broad question. To be honest, I guess it's going a bit beyond my expertise and field, but and I don't have a specific tool in mind because it depends so much on the infrastructure. I mean, working with dozens of marketplace, I can tell you that all of them are using slightly specific different setup and etc. But for me, I would get back to the data in itself. So it's not really a tool, but it's just like making sure that the database is structured enough and it's clean enough and it's aggregated around the user in a nice way. So then you can properly have AI playing with it and giving you right insights. Then there's many options to get there. We have ours, but I've seen a lot of them, and there's very classic one. But yeah.
And leading into that, are there any examples that either of you are aware of really standout examples of AI integration, especially in the peer-to-peer space?
Of generative AI, I think it's really, we're still in the too early. You know, most of the things that are out there in the marketplaces space are really very small scale pilots. They're trying to understand the technology. And I haven't seen anything yet that makes me just go, wow, that's something extraordinary. But I think they will come in a fairly kind of, short space of time.
Absolutely. And final question. Is there an issue with, I think Tanguy, you touched on this earlier, with bots or virtual bots in areas such as recruitment and, automotive, essentially spamming consumers and leading to exhaustion with AI functions?
So you are there over the phone today. You have phone bots in a lot of countries that are just like calling a lot, and people still using and people still using phone somehow. So it will make people maybe a bit more careful, maybe a bit cautious, and it will, again, for me, it's a lot of the responsibility on the marketplace to make sure that there's the right setup to detect this pattern and to be able to block conversation or possibility of engagement if you think that is not the rightful or meaningful person that is willing to engage with my seller, whether it is a professional or a private one.
Pavel, can we just pick up one more question, because I can see Stephen Rothberg has popped a really interesting question in there, and I think it's worth exploring it.
Absolutely.
So he asked, does the AIM Group believe that the increase of generative AI search results on Google and Bing increase the importance of SEM, such as programmatic, performance-based jobs ad syndication across a variety of sites? And I think this goes to one of the most interesting questions about what generative AI is going to do. We've got this potential for a massive increase of content across the web created by generative AI. And anybody wanting to market something or fake something or produce legitimate variants of a great service is going to be able to do this much more easily and effectively. So you will have much greater challenges in establishing the right quality of traffic out of the search engines and the broader market. And I think the answer to Stephen's question is yes. That we are going to see marketing methods that are more performance oriented, that have got a much better understanding of the sources of traffic and the value of that traffic in real conversion terms, becoming much more important and essential because of this, because it's going to be much harder to find in all of that kind of broadened web the important and relevant and the traffic that is actually valuable to your business. So yeah, I think performance-based marketing and the sophisticated variants of it are going to become much more significant. And I think in jobs, absolutely. I mean, jobs is going to have some real problems, because the whole kind of application process in recruitment, the fact that you're going to be able to put much higher quality applications in much higher volume with very easy ways of dealing with it. We've got a whole kind of set of questions in there that are about how you really sort out the good from the bad in a much more effective way. And I think recruitment is going to be the most interesting space to watch in terms of what happens here. And some of that's going to be very negative, and an awful lot, I hope, is going to be very positive in terms of improved ways of making the recruitment process work. So I think that's it from us. Huge thanks to Tanguy and to Freespie for sponsoring. Thank you all out there for coming and joining us. And I hope it's proved helpful. You know where we are if you want to ask us any questions. And we will be distributing this. There will be a link, I think, out from, is it coming from Freespie? I think probably from Freespie, maybe from us as well. I don't know. So, but there will definitely be a distribution for those who'd like a copy of the video and the deck.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Until next time. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.